There's a story going around at the moment regarding an episode of the Canadian version of Dragon's Den. I don't watch the show, I don't watch the British version, but it's the issue of cultural appropriation that I want to touch on. Before I get into the report, let me just say off the top, I think that cultural appropriation is a massively overused term. I think it's one of those things, a bit like so-called white privilege and mansplaining that's fundamentally divisive, and it's uniquely aimed at the West and Westerners. And I think it is massively over exaggerated as a problem. If I could put it that way. Anyway, I'll read out the report and then discuss wider issues as I usually do. This report is by Madeline Halpert. Boba Tea Company apologise over Canada Dragon's Den row. From the 15th of October. Well, that's today actually. A Canadian boba tea company has apologised after Marvel actor Simu Liu accused them of cultural appropriation on an episode of the Dragon's Den reality TV series. On an episode of CBC's Dragon's Den, the Canadian equivalent of the US show Shark Tank, the owners of a Quebec bubble tea brand called Boba pitched a drink to potential investors, including Leo, arguing they were disturbing the popular bubble tea market by using only three simple ingredients to transform the beverage into a convenient and healthier experience. Leo pushed back against the entrepreneurs, accusing them of appropriating the Taiwanese drink known as boba or bubble tea, which has become popular around the world. I'm concerned about this idea of disrupting or disturbing bubble tea, Leo said as a guest on the Star show. There's an issue of taking something that's very distinctly Asian in its identity and making it better, which I have an issue with, he added. The Canadian Chinese actor also pressed the business owners, Sebastian Fizet and Jess Frenette, about whether they had members of staff who understood the cultural significance of the very Asian drink, which is made with tapioca balls. Mr. Fizet responded that their best partner was in Taiwan. They make all the recipes, all the boba. The episode quickly blew up on social media where users attacked the boba owners. The owners responded by issuing an apology on social media on Monday, saying they were sorry for the harm they caused with their words and actions on the show. Simu raised very valid points regarding cultural appropriation, and we welcome the learning opportunity, the business owners said. They added that they would be re-evaluating their branding, packaging, and marketing strategies to ensure that they reflect a respectful and accurate representation of our Taiwanese partnership and bubble tea's cultural roots. Earlier, Leo took to social media as well to try and de-escalate the conflict, arguing that the pair came on the show in good faith. He said he ultimately decided not to contribute the $1 million investment Mr. Fizet and Mr. Burnett were seeking for an 18% stake in their company because of the issues he pointed out with the product. That doesn't mean that I believe they deserve harassment, Leo said in the social media video. Another judge on the show, Manjit Minhas, had agreed to invest in Boba, arguing that there can be new takes on things. Not everything has to be traditional. When first hearing Leo's criticism of the Canadian Joe's pitch on the show, following the social media storm the show created, she changed her mind, saying on Sunday, after more reflection, due diligence, and listening to many of your opinions, I will not be investing in Boba Tea. In a video posted to her Instagram account, she added that she'd had to turn off comments to on her social media platform due to abuse received since the show. It's never okay to send hate and threatening messages to the entrepreneur, she said. Okay, there's quite a few things to break down there. Firstly, the thing about harassment. Anyone who is going out of their way to attack this couple is pathetic and disgraceful, and they need to get a life, basically. It's good that Simulio has, called them out for that, i.e., pushed back on that aspect. But he kind of provoked them in the first place by raising the cultural appropriation issue. I also find it a little bit troubling the way they made this apology because it very much sounds like, what people would mockingly call a struggle session. Um, that is to say that the intolerance of progressiveness we see right? So, oh, it's progressive to be culturally aware of these things and so on, but you need to make these groveling apologies. It just looks like they've had to do that because they were hounded and harassed. I think that's the wrong reason to have to make an apology. I think it should be sincere. It just sounds like they've kind of been hounded into that. That's why I have a problem with it. Um, in terms of the cultural appropriation thing, now that's really contentious. For a start, Simu, I don't know the guy well, but I understand he was born in Harbin, China, and he's a Canadian citizen. So, does he really have a right to speak for a Taiwanese drink? Now, boba tea, it has gone all around the world. We have a branch here in Sunderland, or a boba tea cafe, and you know what? The baristas are white, but so far I haven't seen any Asian people complain about that. Personally, I'm not a massive fan of boba tea. I find it very sweet, a little bit sickly. Um, I could take it in small doses, but I find it a little bit too sweet. That's beside the point. Um, I don't know Taiwanese law. I don't know if they have, for example, what their copyright laws are, or if they get into legislation where something is protected as a cultural asset. Um, and then people might argue, is it really a strong cultural asset? I mean, it's a relatively new thing. Um, Here's the thing with cultural appropriation. I do understand the importance of authenticity. Now, I can understand if you have something that is so really deeply revered in a culture and it's very, very unique to that culture and it's held in almost sacred in a sacred way, and then you get a cheap rip-off somewhere that's passing itself off as authentic. That would be insulting to the source. Um, so I do see the need for authenticity. I have no problem with that. The problem I've got with cultural appropriation the way it's used today is I think it's fundamentally intolerant. It it promotes an exclusiveness narrative, and I think that's unrealistic in a globalized world. So if you really get into if you go into the core of this argument, Italians could say, well, only Italians can make pizza, right? Which would clearly be ridiculous. In fact, I believe the city of Sao Paulo, Brazil, has more pizzerias than anywhere in the world, including Rome or Milan or New York City. Um, Often, when you get trading cultures, or particularly with European countries, cultures that uh, have been colonizers, then culture has spread for that reason. British culture can be found all over the world. You know, cricket is hugely popular in the Indian subcontinent, and dare I say, they're often better than England. That is something that was originally part of British culture. It was spread because of the empire. The English language was spread because of the empire. In fact, the influence Britain has had on the world has been enormous. I don't say that in a braggadocious way, it's just a fact. Um, so, in the case of European culture, that's been spread by colonialism in many ways. In other cases, though, where you see culture around the world, very often it's been as a result of immigration, second, third wave immigration, and then you get cultures that come to another country and um, there's been an effort to preserve that culture. For example, look at any Chinatown in the world, you'll have the Dragon Arch, you'll have Chinese lanterns and so on. What actually defines a Chinatown is subject to some debate. I think in Britain, it's an unofficial designation that to be a proper Chinatown, there has to be an arch. A couple of Chinese shops isn't really a Chinatown. Um, but I think there is an inherent intolerance with this, and I actually see it as somewhat similar to the problem with sensitivity readers. I'll get to that in a second, but I'll cite a few examples where I think this gets quite unpleasant. For example, there was a young woman in the United States, a young white woman, and she was going to her senior prom, and she decided she wanted to wear a cheapao dress, also known as a cheongsam. It's a Chinese style dress, often red, can be other colours, but it's usually red. It's made of silk. It's quite tight fitting, but it's very elegant. That's the thing. And, you know, it is beautiful. She obviously thought so, and she wanted to wear that on her special night. When she did, she was immediately attacked by people accusing her of cultural appropriation because she was white. Ostensibly Chinese Americans. I very much doubt it was actual Chinese people in China harassing her for that. But I thought their bullying behaviour was appalling. You know, what right do they have to tell this young woman she can't wear whatever she wants on her special night? She's not hurting anyone else. Or there was a white guy who, sported dreadlocks in his hair, and that divided black opinion. Some people were saying, "Oh, he's culturally appropriating Caribbean culture." Others saying, you know, "It's the guy's own hair. Let him do what he wants with it." I think in those cases, people should mind their own damn business. If someone happens to have an interest in another culture, surely that shows they're open-minded. Because this is the paradox. If people don't show any interest in other cultures, they'll probably be accused of being parochial and narrow-minded. And the reason why I think it's overused and why that's a problem is because everybody, everybody probably culturally appropriates to some extent. Unless you are a native tribes person, an indigenous tribes person in the middle of the Amazon rainforest, then we live in a globalized world. Everyone probably culturally appropriates to some extent. You know, you will find Indian teenagers who are interested in Japanese manga. You will find Chinese people who enjoy Italian food. And many other examples could be given. This is particularly prominent in Western multicultural societies, the United States, Canada, Brazil, the United Kingdom, and so on. That's the nature of the globalized world that we live in. So I think constantly lecturing about cultural appropriation, firstly, the people who are doing it need to really check themselves and say, well, am I culturally appropriating anything? Because inevitably, Simu Leo has now himself been accused of culturally appropriating West. Now, he's probably a Canadian citizen. I'm not going to give the guy a hard time for, wearing well, Western clothes nowadays. It's not even a thing because that's used all over the world. But the point here is no one really has a position to really lecture on this. There may be some exceptions. I mean, Native American groups may have a point regarding the preservation of culture. That's where the whole controversy over baseball teams using Native American motifs comes from. So I do, to some extent, understand why that would be offensive. Um, there was a music group called the 1492s, and their music was kind of about cultural appropriation. But I also think that if you really get into it, everyone is culturally appropriating, even Native Americans. And to be fair, it wasn't their fault because, their traditional lands were taken over and so on. But nowadays, many of them are disconnected from their own native roots. They don't even often live on reservations, etc. And I'm saying this in a sensitive way because, this is the problem. We live in such a sensitive age where every damn thing you say can be, what did you mean by that? What's the sinister overtones that you mean? And it's like that with cultural appropriation. I just think that in a globalized world, we all do it. I mean, if you have any interest in another culture, you're going to be accused essentially of cultural appropriation by someone. But what I find a little bit galling is it is uniquely aimed at the West and Westerners. When I was in China, I saw a few examples of British culture being, used. For example, I would see a British themed restaurant in Shanghai, and there was some guys outside dressed as Queen guards. It was very tacky and obviously inauthentic. But was I offended? No. Why? I mean, it's a little bit tacky, but it's amusing. It's not. Everyone knows it's not the real thing, so why be offended over it? It's just silly. Um, I just think it's an intolerant narrative because it is pointing to exclusiveness. Now, in terms of this particular story, perhaps the couple could have been a little bit more considerate, perhaps, but they did say that they had an investor in Taiwan or a partner in Taiwan, so presumably they're getting advice from that person. In other words, they actually have done some research. But people who are harassing them, shame on them. That's pathetic. If they're Taiwanese, I don't know if they are or not. If they are, I would say, can you honestly say that you're not appropriating anything? I mean, the Far East, it isn't just China, Taiwan as well, um, often makes cheap imitations of Western products. Um, the flip side, of course, is Taiwan is a major producer of electronics, which the rest of us enjoy. But the point I'm making is everyone is guilty of cultural appropriation to an extent. And I just think it's a disgrace that a couple of entrepreneurs get harassed and hounded on social media because they dare to come up with an idea that's from another culture. I mean, it's or not come up with it, but I guess some of the language they use, making it better was a little bit can come across as a little bit condescending, but the abuse is unnecessary. Um, like I say, this trope seems uniquely aimed at the West. You never really hear about it the other way around. It could be because of the colonialism issue, but um, I think it's just frankly the latest woke trope. Not the latest. It's one of those woke tropes that is just used to look for reasons to be offended. Um, it's for goodness sake, people have a right to enjoy other cultures. Um, Let me know your thoughts on this. I do not say that authenticity is not important. I would argue, actually, sorry, I should round up with this because I mentioned the sensitivity readers thing. I think it's a little bit similar to that because ostensibly the purpose of sensitivity readers is to help writers with their research. But and it's often said, oh, but it's not censorious; it's a choice. They don't have to do it. Well, here's the problem. If a reader says, and I know Ian McEwan's been outspoken on this, but if not a reader, a writer, excuse me, getting ahead of myself. If a writer says, no, I don't want to take on sensitivity readers because I'm concerned they will censor my work, then the publishing house might say, well, sorry, we're pressuring you to do that. I do have a big problem with it. If someone wants to write, I mean, if you get into the purist argument, then no one could ever write about another culture or another time period. Um, the best selling book, Memoirs of a Geisha, was written by a white American guy, and it's a best selling book. It's well written. Um, but are we really saying only a Japanese woman could write that? That's like saying only a soldier can write about a fictional soldier in a war, right? It gets to the point of ridiculousness, and I think it ruins creativity. We can even expand this to the world of acting. I mean, this ridiculous notion that only gay actors should play gay historic characters, or only a Jewish person can play Leonard Bernstein, for example. That was a recent thing. Bradley Cooper got heat for that. I mean, it just acting is the point of playing another person, right? I think it should be within reason. I can see some controversy where, you get a white person playing a black historical character or a black person playing a white historical character because that gets into believability. But otherwise, it's called acting for a reason. Um, Sensitivity reading, I do think it's censorious because the sensitivity reader may be too damn sensitive and they may just want that censor half the book. Um, there has to be creative scope for people to come up with ideas. And if people find it inappropriate, whatever, they can complain. They say it's not good. But I don't like the idea of sensitivity readers. It's a little bit 1984 to me. Um, and cultural appropriation, same thing. It's like it's kind of promoting this exclusive narrative. That's how I feel about it. Anyway, I'll wrap this one up. Let me know your thoughts and thanks for watching.